The warship drifted back into the Dominion capital after weeks at the front lines. The scars of battle still marked its black hull, and the memory of fire and blood still clung to the soldiers inside. Elias Kane walked through the corridors with slow steps, his wounds wrapped, his body weary but his spirit steady. By his side was Princess Seraphine, her presence as unshaken as always, though her eyes carried a new weight after what she had witnessed. The battle had changed them both. For Seraphine, it was the first time she had truly seen the cost of endless war. For Elias, it was the first time he had fought alongside her, not as an enemy, but as a strange kind of ally. The memory of standing together among the ruins still burned in his mind. When the ship docked, they were summoned at once to the Empress's throne. The court gathered again, whispering and staring. Some remembered Elias from the arena and looked at him with reluctant respect. Others looked with open hate, muttering that the human should have died long ago, but none could ignore him anymore. His presence now carried weight, the same weight as the princess who walked beside him. The Empress sat high upon her throne, her gaze sharp and unreadable. When Elias and Seraphine entered, silence fell across the chamber. "You return alive," the Empress said slowly, her voice filling the hall. "Not only alive, but with tales that ripple across the empire. You fought in my armies, you stood in the fire of war. Speak then, human, tell me what you saw." Elias stood straight, though pain still tugged at every movement. His voice was calm, but strong. "I saw death. I saw warriors on both sides give their lives without hesitation. I saw humans strike your fleets and refuse to surrender. And I saw Karis warriors fight with the same pride, the same strength. But I also saw something else." The Empress tilted her head slightly. "And what was that?" "That we are not so different," Elias said. "You believe humans are weak, but weakness does not build fleets, does not face impossible odds, does not keep fighting when defeat seems certain. Your people are strong, but even your strength bends under the cost of endless war. If this continues, neither of us will stand. You will bleed. We will burn. And the stars will be filled with ash." The chamber was still. Some nobles frowned in anger, others lowered their eyes in thought. Seraphine stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "He speaks the truth," she said. "I saw it with my own eyes. For all our power, the humans are not breaking. They will never break. Mother, if we keep treating them as prey, we will only forge them into something greater. Their fire grows stronger with every battle. One day it will consume even us." The Empress's gaze shifted between her daughter and the human warrior. Her silence stretched long, heavy, suffocating. Finally, she spoke. "You suggest peace," she said, her tone almost mocking. "Alliance, a bond between predator and prey, between immortal and fragile. Do you know what you are asking? It would tear the foundation of the Dominion apart." "Then let it tear," Seraphine said firmly. "Foundations can be rebuilt. Empires can change. Perhaps it is time ours did." The Empress's eyes narrowed, but Elias saw something in them that was not anger. It was curiosity, maybe even doubt. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "You wanted me tested. You wanted to see if I was worth anything. You have seen it now. I am not here to beg for peace. I am here to tell you what will come. Humanity will fight you until the stars themselves die. If you crush one of us, 10 more will rise. If you burn one world, 2 more will take its place. You can waste centuries trying to break us, or you can stand with us. The choice is yours." The court erupted into whispers. Some hissed at his arrogance, others nodded at his words. Seraphine placed her hand on his arm, a silent gesture of strength. The Empress raised her hand and silence returned. She studied Elias for a long, piercing moment, then turned her gaze on Seraphine. "You claim to admire this human," she said slowly. "You claim he is proof of what his kind can be. Then tell me, daughter, what is it you truly want?" Seraphine met her mother's eyes without fear. "I want him," she said. "Not as a pet, not as a prisoner, as my equal. I would stand with him as he stood with me. I would bind my life to his." Gasps filled the chamber. The words struck like lightning, shocking every noble in the hall. To even suggest marriage between a Karis princess and a human was beyond unthinkable. It was rebellion against tradition itself. The Empress leaned back on her throne, her crimson eyes gleaming. You would bind yourself to a mortal? You, who could live 1,000 years, would tie yourself to a man whose life will flicker and fade before a century is gone? Yes, Seraphine said firmly. Because it is not the length of life that matters. It is the fire within it, and his fire burns brighter than any I have ever seen. Elias's heart pounded. He had not expected her to say it aloud, not before the entire court, not before the Empress herself. Yet she had spoken without hesitation. He looked at her and saw no doubt in her face, only truth. The Empress was silent for a long time. The court held its breath. Finally, the Empress spoke again. Very well, she said. If this is what you desire, then let the stars bear witness. But know this. If you choose him, you choose a path that may destroy you both. Your bond will be tested by war, by time, by every force that seeks to tear you apart. If you can withstand it, then perhaps there is a future where our peoples are not enemies. But if you fail, her eyes narrowed, cold and sharp, then both of you will be remembered only as a warning. Seraphine bowed her head. I accept. The court erupted again, some in outrage, others in disbelief. Elias stood still, his mind heavy with the weight of what had just been spoken. He had fought all his life for survival, for honor, for his people. He had never imagined this, standing in the court of his enemies, bound not in chains but in something far deeper. That night, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Elias and Seraphine walked side by side. The stars stretched above them, endless and silent. Do you mean it? Elias asked finally. What you said to her. Do you truly mean it? Seraphine turned to him, her face calm, her eyes burning softly. Every word. I do not want you as a symbol, Elias. I want you as you are. I want your fire beside mine. Even if it lasts only a short time, it will be worth more than 1,000 empty years. Elias looked at her, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he allowed himself to hope. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand. Her fingers closed around his, cool and strong but steady. I don't know what the future holds, he said quietly. But if you stand with me, then I'll stand with you, no matter what comes. And in that moment, under the endless stars, a bond was forged. Not just between a warrior and a princess, but between two worlds, two empires, two fires that refused to die. The path ahead would not be easy. War would not end overnight. Prejudice would not vanish with a single choice. But the seed had been planted, and seeds had a way of growing, even in the hardest ground. The human and the alien princess stood together, and for the first time in centuries, the stars held the promise of something new, not conquest, not surrender, but hope. The human warrior sat in chains inside the dim chamber of the Karis flagship. The walls around him were smooth black metal, carved with strange designs that seemed to pulse faintly like living veins. The air smelled cold, metallic, and foreign. Elias Kane sat with his back against the wall, his arms bound tightly before him. His body ached from battle, every muscle sore, and a deep cut still bled slowly across his shoulder. He tried not to show weakness, even though exhaustion threatened to pull him under. His eyes scanned the room, memorizing every detail. That was the habit of a soldier. Always study, always prepare, even when the fight seemed impossible. The door opened with a hiss, and 2 Karis guards entered. They were tall, pale, and graceful, in their black armor, their crimson eyes glowing in the half-light. Between them walked Princess Seraphine. Her steps were silent, her cloak trailing behind her like flowing shadows. Elias tensed, his chains clinking. He hated the idea of being paraded like some prize. He met her gaze without flinching, his jaw set in defiance. You are still alive, Seraphine said softly, her voice carrying the smooth tone of royalty, yet edged with something sharper. Most humans would not have survived the wounds you took. Humans don't give up easy, Elias replied, his voice rough but steady. Seraphine tilted her head, studying him like a rare artifact. There was no fear in his eyes. No submission. Only the burning spark that had first caught her attention on the battlefield. She dismissed her guards with a gesture, leaving only herself and the human in the chamber. "Do you know why I spared you?" she asked. "I don't care," Elias answered. "If you're planning to torture me for information, save yourself the trouble. I won't talk." Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "You misunderstand me. If I wanted you broken, I would have left you to my soldiers. No, I spared you because you are different." Elias laughed bitterly. "Different? I'm just a man doing his duty. Nothing more." "That is where you are wrong," Seraphine said, stepping closer. Her eyes glowed softly as she looked down at him. "Your kind is short-lived, fragile compared to us, and yet you burn with a fire that we in our long years have forgotten. On the battlefield, you stood against certain death without hesitation. You faced me with defiance instead of fear. That is not ordinary." Elias shifted against his chains, his expression hard. "We fight because we have no choice. You invaded our worlds. You slaughter our people. What kind of man would I be if I didn't stand my ground?" Her gaze lingered on him. She could hear the truth in his words, and it fascinated her. For centuries, the Karis had ruled through fear and power. Yet this single human resisted her simply by existing, by refusing to break. "You see us as monsters," she said quietly. "Am I wrong?" Elias shot back. Seraphine's eyes softened slightly. "Perhaps not. But perhaps there is more to us than you know." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts. Elias did not trust her, but he sensed she was not lying either. There was a strange sincerity in her tone that unsettled him. At last, Seraphine turned away. "You will remain here under my protection. No harm will come to you. I don't need your protection," Elias muttered. She glanced back at him, her crimson eyes glowing in the dim light. "Whether you want it or not, you have it. You are mine now, Elias Kane. And I intend to learn what makes humans like you so unyielding." The door closed behind her, leaving Elias in the dark once more. His chest tightened with frustration. He had survived the battlefield only to become a prisoner, a curiosity for an alien princess. Yet deep inside, a small part of him wondered what she truly wanted, and why she looked at him not as prey but as something else. Days passed aboard the Karis flagship. Elias remained under constant watch, but Seraphine visited him often. She asked him questions about humanity, about war, about life on Earth. At first, Elias gave her nothing but silence or bitter remarks, yet slowly, against his will, he found himself speaking. When she asked about Earth's sunrises, he described the golden light over mountains. When she asked about family, he told her of his sister who still lived back home, a doctor in a small city. He kept his answers simple, never revealing military secrets, but each word seemed to intrigue her more. Seraphine, in turn, revealed pieces of herself. She spoke of the dominion, of the weight of being heir to an empire built on conquest. She confessed that immortality, once seen as a blessing, often felt like a prison. "We live for centuries," she said one night as she stood by the window, "and yet in all that time, we forget what it means to fight for every moment. Humans burn brightly but briefly. We endure endlessly but without fire. Do you see the difference?" Elias listened, though he kept his guard up. He did not trust her words, but he could not deny their weight. There was loneliness in her voice, a loneliness he had never expected to hear from one of his enemies. Despite himself, he began to look at her differently. She was still the enemy, still the daughter of the Empress who ordered the destruction of human colonies. But beneath the cold mask of royalty, he saw a spark of something human. Curiosity, longing, even admiration. One evening, as Seraphine left his chamber, Elias called after her. "Why me? Out of all the humans you fought, why spare me?" She paused, her cloak shimmering in the light. Because when I looked into your eyes, I did not see prey. I saw a warrior who refused to kneel, and I wanted to know why. The door closed and Elias sat in silence. Her words lingered in his mind, stirring emotions he could not name. He hated being her prisoner, yet he could not deny that something was changing between them. Meanwhile, rumors spread through the Karis court. Whispers of the princess keeping a human captive reached the ears of nobles and generals. They saw it as disgrace, as weakness. Humans were supposed to be conquered, not cherished. The Empress herself grew suspicious. One day she summoned Seraphine to her throne chamber, a vast hall of black stone and silver fire. "You keep this human alive," the Empress said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Why?" Seraphine bowed her head but did not hide her defiance. "Because he is unlike the others. He shows strength that even our warriors lack. I believe we can learn from him." The Empress's crimson eyes narrowed. "Learn from prey? You risk dishonor." Seraphine met her mother's gaze. "Perhaps it is not dishonor to see value where others do not. Perhaps it is wisdom." The Empress was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke coldly. "Keep your human if you wish. But remember, daughter, you are heir to the Dominion. Do not let weakness stain your blood." Seraphine bowed again, but inside her resolve only grew stronger. She would not let Elias be taken from her. She wanted to understand him, to learn what made his spirit so unbreakable. Back in his chamber, Elias felt the shift as well. He knew he was no longer just a prisoner. He was at the center of something larger, something dangerous. The princess's attention could protect him, but it also painted a target on his back. If the Karis nobles hated the idea of a human standing beside their princess, then his survival would not be easy. As he sat in the dim light, Elias closed his eyes and thought of Earth, of the people he had sworn to protect. He reminded himself that he was still a soldier, still fighting even in chains. But when he remembered Seraphine's crimson eyes watching him with something that looked almost like admiration, his chest tightened in a way he could not explain. Perhaps the real battle had only just begun. Elias Kane stood in the center of the vast Karis throne chamber, chains still binding his wrists. Tall pillars rose into the shadows above, and silver flames flickered along the walls, casting strange reflections across the black stone floor. Dozens of Karis nobles surrounded him in silence, their crimson eyes cold and hungry, as if they were watching a wild beast put on display. At the far end of the hall sat the Empress herself, a figure of pale authority draped in robes of midnight, silk. Her crown gleamed with dark jewels and her gaze was sharp enough to pierce stone. Elias had been dragged here by guards after long days of captivity. He had expected interrogation, maybe even execution. What he did not expect was the court itself, the gathering of an empire's most powerful, staring at him as if he were both an insult and a curiosity. He kept his back straight, refusing to kneel, even as the guards shoved him forward. Pain burned in his shoulder from an old wound, but he ignored it. A soldier of Earth did not bow to his enemies. The Empress studied him for a long, quiet moment. "So this is the human," she said at last, her voice carrying across the chamber like a cold wind. "The one who dared defy my soldiers. The one my daughter has claimed to protect." Whispers spread through the court. Some nobles sneered. Others looked offended, but all of them were eager to see what would happen. Seraphine stood near her mother, her expression unreadable. She had dressed in her ceremonial armor, dark and elegant, her cloak trailing across the floor. Her eyes never left Elias, though she kept her face calm. The Empress leaned forward. "Human, do you know why you stand here?" Elias met her gaze, his voice steady though the weight of the room pressed against him. "Because your soldiers failed to kill me. Because your daughter decided to keep me alive." The hall erupted in murmurs. The audacity of the prisoner shocked them, but Elias did not care. He had nothing left to lose. The Empress raised a hand, and silence fell again. "You speak boldly for one so fragile. Do you not understand where you stand?" You are in the heart of the Dominion, surrounded by those who see your kind as prey. One word from me, and you are ash. Elias tightened his jaw but refused to lower his eyes. Then say the word. But know this. My people will never kneel. You can burn our worlds. You can kill our soldiers, but humanity doesn't break. We fight until there's nothing left. A hush fell over the chamber. The Empress's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something else. Interest, perhaps even respect. Before she could respond, Seraphine stepped forward. This is why I protect him, the princess said firmly. Do you see it, mother? Do you see what I see? He stands before you, weak in body, broken in chains, and still he dares to defy. That is the strength humanity holds. That is why I will not let him be discarded. The nobles gasped in outrage. One shouted blasphemy, a princess speaking in defense of prey. Others muttered that she was tainted, unworthy of the throne. The Empress's face hardened, and the weight of her authority silenced them again. Seraphine, the Empress said, her tone sharp, you speak dangerously. To claim worth in prey is to invite shame upon your bloodline. But Seraphine did not falter. She stepped closer to Elias, her presence a shield against the court's fury. Then let him prove it. If you in the court doubt his strength, let him face the ancient trials. Let him fight in the arena as our warriors once did. If he fails, he dies, and my honor is satisfied. If he survives, she paused, her eyes glinting. Then you cannot deny the truth I speak. The hall buzzed with shock. The arena was a place of blood and legend, where only the strongest survived. To throw a human into such a trial was madness, and yet the idea stirred excitement among the nobles. They wanted to see him crushed, humiliated before their eyes. The Empress considered her daughter's words carefully. At last, she gave a small nod. Very well. Let the human prove himself in the arena. Let all see if he is truly worthy of your admiration, or if he dies as all prey should. Elias felt the chains tighten around his wrists as the guards pulled him back. His heart pounded, but he did not let fear show on his face. He knew what this meant. He was being thrown into a death sentence surrounded by alien warriors far stronger than him. But he also knew something else. If he surrendered now, if he gave in, then everything he had fought for on Doria would be meaningless. Later, in the quiet of his cell, Seraphine came to him again. Her guards stayed outside, leaving her alone with the human. She looked at him for a long time before speaking. You should hate me, she said softly. I have put you in the arena. You may not survive. Elias met her gaze. You didn't give me a choice, but I'd rather die fighting than rot in chains. At least, this way, I can show your people what a human can do. For a moment, Seraphine almost smiled. There was pride in her eyes, though she hid it quickly. Do not underestimate the arena. The champions you will face have centuries of strength and skill. They will not show mercy. Neither will I, Elias replied. The day of the trial came. The arena was vast, carved into the heart of the Dominion's capital. Thousands of Karis filled the stands, their voices echoing like thunder as they waited to see the human die. The floor of the arena was marked with scars from countless battles, and the silver fire of the Dominion burned high above. Elias was led into the center, unchained but armed only with a simple blade and a shield. The crowd jeered, laughing at the sight of the fragile creature who dared to stand where warriors had fallen. Across from him the gates opened and his first opponent entered. A massive Karis warrior, armored in black steel, wielding a weapon that looked like a cross between a spear and a blade. His eyes glowed with bloodlust as he advanced. The horn sounded, and the fight began. The Karis charged with terrifying speed. Elias barely raised his shield in time, the impact nearly breaking his arm. He staggered back, pain shooting through him, but he kept his footing. He knew he could not match strength with strength. He had to rely on speed, on wit, on survival, instinct. He sidestepped, letting the warrior's strike slam into the ground and slashed at his side. The blade cut shallow but drew blood. The crowd hissed in surprise. The fight dragged on, each clash testing Elias's endurance. He took hits, his body aching, but he refused to fall. Every time he rose again, every time he struck back, the crowd grew louder. Some jeered, others began to murmur with reluctant respect. Seraphine watched from the royal balcony, her hands clenched at her sides. Her heart raced with every blow he took, but each time he stood again, her pride in him grew stronger. When Elias finally brought down his first opponent, the arena erupted. The warrior lay defeated, and the human still stood, bloodied, exhausted, but unbroken. The trials continued. One opponent fell, then another. Each was stronger, faster, more skilled than Elias, but he refused to die. He fought with everything he had, his mind, his courage, his sheer stubborn will. By the time the final challenger fell, Elias could barely stand, his vision blurred and his body broken, but he raised his blade in triumph. The arena was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, applause began. Not mockery this time, but genuine recognition. The nobles who had sneered now looked on with shock, some even with respect. The Empress herself rose, her expression unreadable. "The human has survived," she declared. "He has proven himself." Elias looked up at her, chest heaving, and met her gaze without fear. Seraphine stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "This is why I chose him. This is why humanity cannot be dismissed. You see now what I see, Mother. You see the fire that cannot be extinguished." The Empress's eyes flickered, and though she said nothing more, she did not stop her daughter. For Elias Cain, the arena had been more than survival. It had been a statement, one that would echo through the Dominion for years to come. And in that moment, though still surrounded by enemies, Elias felt something strange stir inside him. For the first time since his capture, he believed that humanity might have a chance, not through strength of arms alone, but through the courage to defy, to endure, and to inspire even those who once saw them as nothing more than prey. The arena was still filled with the echoes of cheering when Elias Cain was dragged back to the holding chambers. His body shook from exhaustion, and every cut on his skin burned like fire. He could barely stand, but his spirit felt strangely light. Against every expectation, against the will of thousands who had gathered to see him die, he had survived. When the guards pushed him onto the stone bench, he leaned back against the wall, his breaths coming slow and heavy. The sound of the crowd still reached him, muffled now, but filled with something new. Not just scorn, not just hate. There had been respect in those voices, reluctant and unwilling perhaps, but real. The door opened, and Princess Seraphine entered. She dismissed the guards with a single gesture, her cloak sweeping behind her as she moved closer. For a long moment she said nothing. Her eyes moved over him, lingering on every wound, every drop of blood that stained his skin. "You should be dead," she said softly, "and yet you are not." Elias gave a faint, bitter laugh. "I've been told that before." Seraphine lowered herself so she was eye level with him. There was no cruelty in her gaze, no cold superiority as there had been when they first met. Instead, her expression was filled with something Elias had not expected: pride. "When you stood in that arena," she said, her voice low but firm, "you did more than survive. You forced them to see you. Even my mother cannot deny it now. The fire in you is undeniable." Elias shifted, grimacing as pain stabbed his ribs. "I didn't fight for them. I fought because I won't let anyone watch me break." "Perhaps," Seraphine said. "But whether you wished it or not, you showed them what humanity is made of. You planted a seed. It will grow." Elias didn't answer. His body was too tired, his mind too heavy. But he could see in her eyes that she truly believed it. Over the days that followed, the story of the human who survived the trials spread across the Dominion. Nobles whispered in their halls. Warriors debated among themselves. Many still despised him, calling him nothing more than a lucky beast, but others admitted that no ordinary creature could have endured what he had. Slowly, the image of humanity began to shift, from prey to something more dangerous, something worth watching. The Empress remained silent, neither praising nor condemning, but Seraphine knew her mother was watching closely. The court had changed, and the human was at the center of it. Seraphine spent more time with Elias after the trials. She brought healers to tend his wounds, though he resisted their methods at first. She questioned him often, not about military secrets, but about his thoughts, his people, his memories. He spoke with reluctance, but the walls he had built around himself began to weaken. One night, as they sat in the quiet of his chamber, Seraphine asked, "What drives you, Elias? What keeps you standing when all logic says you should fall?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "I don't know if I can explain it. Humans, we know our lives are short. We don't have centuries like you. Every day could be our last, so we make it matter. We fight for the people we love, for the hope that tomorrow will be better. And when someone tries to take that away from us, we resist, even if it kills us." Seraphine listened in silence, her red eyes soft in the dim light. "Perhaps that is why I am drawn to you," she admitted. "You remind me of what it means to burn brightly, even in the face of darkness." Elias looked away, his chest tightening with a feeling he did not want to name. She was still the enemy, still the daughter of the Empress who waged war against his people. And yet, when she spoke to him like this, he could almost forget. War, however, did not pause for their conversations. Reports reached the Dominion court that human fleets were striking back harder than before. Outposts burned, supply lines were cut, and for the first time in decades, Karis commanders spoke of setbacks. Humanity, though smaller and weaker, refused to surrender. Their spirit spread across the stars just as it had spread in the arena. The court grew restless. Some nobles called for harsher measures, for total extermination. Others whispered that perhaps Seraphine was right, that humanity was too dangerous to be treated as mere prey. Tension spread like fire through dry grass. One evening, Seraphine was summoned again to her mother's throne. The Empress's voice was heavy with command. "Your human has become a symbol. His survival stirs unrest. Some see it as weakness, in you, others as a challenge to me. This cannot continue unchecked." Seraphine stood tall. "Elias Kane is proof of humanity's strength. We should not fear that truth. We should use it. Imagine what our empire could become if we joined their fire with our endurance." The Empress's eyes narrowed. "You speak of alliance, of union with prey. Do you understand what you are suggesting? It is unthinkable." "Unthinkable does not mean impossible," Seraphine replied. "Our people are strong but stagnant. Humanity is fragile but alive in a way we have forgotten. Together, we could be greater than either alone." The Empress did not respond immediately. Her silence was deep like the calm before a storm. Finally, she said, "You speak as if you admire him." Seraphine's voice was clear. "I do." The chamber fell silent. The words hung heavy in the air, shocking even the guards who stood along the walls. The Empress's gaze sharpened, but there was no anger, only calculation. "Very well," she said at last. "If you admire him so, then let us test your conviction. The war with humanity is not over. The next battle will decide much. Take your human. Let him see the cost of defiance. If he survives it, if he inspires even then, perhaps I will consider your words." Seraphine bowed her head, her heart racing. She knew her mother had not yielded, but she had opened a path. A dangerous one, but a path nonetheless. When she told Elias, his reaction was guarded. "You're using me," he said flatly. "Perhaps," Seraphine admitted, "but I will not deny that I care what happens to you. You are more than a prisoner to me now." Elias studied her face, trying to read the truth behind her words. He saw no mockery, no lie, only sincerity. It unsettled him more than hatred ever could. Soon after, Elias was taken aboard a warship bound for the front lines. Seraphine traveled with him, defying tradition by placing herself at the edge of battle. The journey was tense, filled with silence, and glances that carried more weight than words. When the fleet reached the contested world, the void lit up with war. Human ships darted between massive Dominion cruisers, smaller but faster, striking with precision and disappearing before counterattacks could land. Elias watched from the observation deck, his heart pounding as he recognized the tactics of his people. "They fight with everything they have," he murmured, "even knowing the odds." "Like you," Seraphine said quietly beside him. For the first time, Elias saw doubt in her crimson eyes. She had grown up believing her people were invincible, that the Dominion would never be challenged. But here, in the chaos of battle, she saw the truth. Humanity, though outmatched, refused to break. When the fighting reached the ground, Seraphine insisted Elias come with her. Against his better judgment, he agreed. Together they stepped onto the battlefield, surrounded by soldiers from both sides. For a brief, strange moment, human eyes met Kari's eyes, not with hate but with recognition. They were warriors all, bound by the same fire. Elias fought again, side by side with Seraphine. He cut down enemies with blade and rifle, his body screaming with pain but his spirit unshaken. Seraphine fought with elegance and deadly grace, but every time she looked at him, she saw not prey, but an equal. By the battle's end, neither side had claimed true victory. The humans retreated with heavy losses, but they had struck wounds deep enough to remind the Dominion they were not invincible. As the smoke cleared, Seraphine stood beside Elias, her cloak torn, her blade stained. She looked at him, her chest rising with heavy breaths, and said, "Now do you see why I chose you? You are not just one man. You are the spirit of your people, and I will stand with you, no matter what it costs." Elias met her gaze, and though he wanted to deny it, he felt the truth in her words. Something had changed. Something bigger than war. Bigger than either of them. And he knew the choice ahead would decide not just their lives, but the fate of two empires. The night sky above the frontier world of Doria was filled with fire. Huge warships clashed in orbit, their weapons streaking through the black heavens like falling stars. The ground shook as explosions rained down from above, and the people of the small colony city ran for their lives. The human defenses were thin, almost broken, but still they fought to hold the line. Captain Elias Kane stood in the middle of the chaos. Dust covered his armor, blood stained his shoulder, but his grip on his rifle was strong. Around him, only a few soldiers remained from his unit. Most had already fallen in the brutal fight against the Karis Dominion. The Karis were not like any enemy humanity had faced before. Tall, pale, and impossibly fast, they looked like nightmares from old human legends, vampires brought to life among the stars. Their red eyes glowed in the smoke, and their fangs shone whenever they struck. "Captain, the civilians are almost clear," one of Elias's soldiers shouted, his voice shaky but determined. Elias nodded, scanning the burning streets. The evacuation. Ships were lifting off one by one, carrying families and children to safety. That was their mission, to hold the line long enough for the people to escape. He knew the chances of survival were slim, but giving up was never an option. "Hold this street," Elias ordered. "If they want these people, they'll have to come through us first." The soldiers took cover behind shattered walls and overturned vehicles. Their weapons hummed with low energy, their power cells nearly drained, but no one ran. The humans knew what was coming, yet still they chose to fight. From the shadows ahead, figures emerged. The Karis warriors stepped forward with elegant cruelty. They carried weapons of black metal, sharp and strange, but some relied only on their claws and fangs. Their movements were silent, graceful, like predators stalking prey. At the center of their formation stood a figure in dark armor, her presence impossible to ignore. Princess Seraphine, heir to the Karis Dominion, watched the humans with unblinking red eyes. Unlike the soldiers around her, she carried herself not with bloodlust but with curiosity. She had been told that humans were weak, fragile creatures whose lives burned out in the blink of an eye. Yet here, on this ruined street, She saw something different. The man standing at the front, the one giving orders, did not tremble or beg. He stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes burning with defiance. Elias felt her gaze but did not falter. He had faced death before, though never on this scale. He knew this battle was lost, but his duty was not finished. His people were still escaping, and he would not let these pale monsters reach them. The first wave of Kari's soldiers rushed forward, their speed terrifying. Elias fired, his rifle spitting bursts of blue light. One alien fell, then another, but still they came. His soldiers fought desperately, their shouts mixing with the roar of weapons and the hiss of alien blades. The street became a storm of violence, sparks flying, stone shattering, and bodies falling. Through it all, Elias moved with fierce determination. He covered his men, pulled one from the path of a deadly strike, and kept pushing back against the tide. Every second mattered. Every second gave another family time to escape. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. This human should have broken already. His kind should have fled or collapsed in despair. But he did not. Even as his soldiers died around him, even as the Caris pressed closer, he fought with a fire she could not understand. It stirred something, deep within her chest, something she had never felt before. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The human line thinned until Elias stood almost alone. His rifle clicked empty, and he drew his blade, a simple steel weapon that looked pitiful against the Caris's advanced arms. Yet in his hands it was deadly. He cut down one alien, then another, each strike fueled by stubborn will. Blood ran. Down his arm, his breaths came ragged, but still he did not yield. Finally, he was surrounded. The last of his soldiers had fallen, and the street was silent except for the crackle of flames. Elias raised his blade again, ready to sell his life dearly. "Come on, then," he growled, his voice hoarse but steady. "If this is the end, I'll take as many of you with me as I can." The Caris warriors hesitated, surprised by his defiance. Normally, prey begged for mercy or collapsed in fear. This human stood tall, daring them to strike. It was then that Seraphine stepped forward. Her soldiers parted instantly, bowing their heads. She moved with the grace of royalty, her long cloak trailing behind her as she approached the battered warrior. Her eyes locked on his, and for a moment the battlefield seemed to fade away. "You are human," she said, her voice smooth and cold, yet carrying a strange warmth beneath it. "And yet you do not tremble before me. Why?" Elias tightened his grip on his blade. "Because fear won't save my people," he answered, "and I won't give you the satisfaction of seeing me crawl." Seraphine tilted her head, studying him like a rare specimen. She could hear his heartbeat, fast but steady. She could smell his blood, fresh and strong. Any other Caris would have killed him by now, drained him of life. But something stopped her. Something about his fire fascinated her. Her soldiers waited for the order to strike. Instead, she lifted a hand. "Spare him," she commanded. The Caris warriors looked at her in shock, but none dared disobey. They seized Elias, forcing him to his knees, though he struggled against their grip. His eyes never left hers, filled with anger and defiance. Seraphine leaned closer, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "You are not like the others. You are interesting." Elias spat blood to the ground and glared up at her. "I'm not your pet. Do what you're going to do." For the first time in her long life, Seraphine felt a spark of amusement. This fragile, short-lived creature dared to defy her without fear. She could not kill him. Not yet. She wanted to see more, to understand why humans fought so fiercely. Despite their weakness, "Take him to my ship," she ordered. "He is mine now." The soldiers obeyed, dragging Elias away from the ruined street. Above them, the last evacuation ships escaped into the night sky. The mission was complete. He had bought them the time they needed. But now he was a prisoner, taken by the very enemy he had fought to resist. As the Caris fleet withdrew, the burning colony was left in silence. High above, Princess Seraphine stood at the window of her flagship, her eyes fixed on the human warrior who now sat in chains. She did not yet understand why she had spared him. All she knew was that he was different, and for the first time in centuries the immortal princess felt curiosity burning like fire in her chest. And so began a strange bond between predator and prey, one that would shake the fate of empires.